Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me okay? This is Janine.
I can hear you, Janine.
I can hear you, Janine.
Excellent, thank you.
Happy New Year to everybody.
Happy New Year, Judy.
Happy New Year, everyone.
Vice Mayor Pierce, will you be leading the meeting tonight?
I suspect Mayor Weaver is on his way. Let me quickly pull up the agenda here. So just killing a little time here. One of those amazing qualities of former Mayor Shumway was his timeliness and attention to detail. So okay, so how about if we just get started with public comments on non-agenda items? Nancy?
Sounds like a good idea.
Oh, here we go.
Thanks, Vice Mayor. Let's do that.
City Clerk, do we have any folks wishing to provide us with a public comment?
I have not received any previous requests at this time.
Great, thank you. City Manager Jordan, do you want us to get started? Do you want to get started with the work session related to COVID Business Assistant Program update?
Absolutely. Thank you, Vice Mayor Pierce. I'll just give a short introduction here. We do have Brad Enzi with us this evening from the Laramie Chamber Business Alliance. And of course, the intent tonight is to update on, as you said, our COVID Business Assistance Program in furtherance of our economic development goals for the community. So you'll recall that in March of 2020, we negotiated and the council approved funding for a business assistance grant and loan program that we would partner with LCBA to provide to the community. As you know, the city contracts every year with LCBA to execute our economic development activities, programs, et cetera, for the city. And so the existing partnership is just a ready and robust path for us to deploy this new program for COVID assistance in a pretty rapid fashion. The purpose of the business assistance program is to provide kind of a local gap filling relief program that would be complementary to federal state business assistance programs like the ones you hear about, including the Paycheck Protection Program, the Economic Injury and Disaster Loans, et cetera. And our local program was designed to build just kind of a finer mesh safety net around those federal and state programs. We have provided to you in the cover sheet a program outline, and I hope you've had a chance to look at that. I don't want to spend too much time on that, Council, simply because I suspect that Mr. Enzi will maybe touch on some of those statistics and metrics. I do want to give a nod before I hand it to Brad to the members of the board who have been administering this program with city and LCBA staff. We do have a 7-member board that by resolution of the council would consist of the CEO of LCBA, Brad, myself, and the city's operating officer, that of course is Malia Brown. Then we also have 2 members of the LCBA Finance Committee, and we have 2 members of the community at large that have a finance, accounting, banking, or similar expertise in their toolkit. So we've listed in the cover sheets the members of the committee, and I'd like to acknowledge publicly Chad Whitty, Misty Geely, Rebecca Miller, Steve Blundell, who are our citizen folks who assist us and bring their expertise to the table to help us vet out these loan applications. So with that, I'll stop there. If there's anything at the end that you have questions on or that we haven't touched on, once Brad has the floor, please feel free to circle back with me. Thank you.
So we should turn it over to Brad then. Thank you.
Mayor Weaver, members of the council, thanks for having me tonight. I think this is a good time and an important time to do just kind of an update on, Janine did a good job of encapsulating kind of where the program started, how we partnered. We had been talking as the organization, we had allocated some money and the city stepped up big, and it really is designed to, and I'm happy to report, found that finer mesh around our local businesses. Today we had another meeting and approved another $2,000 or approved $1,000 in grants and got a request to get some extra information and help connect a business to some additional funding. They were in the mental health sector, which, so just to make sure we're getting them to all sources. So we're at around $116,000 that we've either loaned and distributed. That comes in $26,000 in change in grants, and then $89,300 in loans. Distribution wise, the numbers wise, there have been 27 approved grants now and 5 approved loans. The loan amounts, the grant amounts are all right around $1,000. We've had 4 that that applied for less. And the way that the process works is a business can come in, show us what their losses were due to COVID and where the assistance is needed. And so a lot of that went to utilities, rent, just making sure that the business could keep their doors open in the grant process. In the loan process, we had a lot of losses that were due to COVID. Those came mainly in the service industry, childcare, and then some that were supporting supporting the efforts to roll out early adoption of masks and make sure that our service workers in town had masks. So they front-loaded, those businesses front-loaded getting inventory into print, face masks, and things like that. The way that the loans are structured is you've got a year before you begin the payback process. They're on a very low interest amortization based upon the level of loan you take. So the bigger loan you have, the more the interest rate goes up. The process that we go through is on a weekly basis. We take all the applications that have been received. Bailey Scott in our office, who's done an amazing job of administering this and making sure everybody stays synced up, goes through and makes sure that all the requirements that were set forth in the agreement with the council are met in terms of the information we need to assess it. Then they're distributed to the loan committee on Thursday, and then generally on Friday morning we meet. Scheduling didn't allow for a Friday morning meeting last week, so we evaluated the 2 grant applications this morning. Typically in those meetings, we're learning a lot about what's going on in the businesses in town. We're hurting. I think everybody, this is a very scrappy business community though. People are everything from like at the Alibi where they put in clamshells to patio heaters and extra outdoor, trying to extend the season for extra tables. I have to say that I'm proud of our business community for the scrappiness and resilience, but when you look at other overlays that happen because of COVID, such as the first loss and then reduction of football, the football season brings about 175,000 visitors to town. That impacts everything from our hotels to our service industry. When the basketball season started, they let about 2,000 people in the arena auditorium, which would bring some number from out of town that would buy dinner, come to the game. That restriction now, we're losing those 2,000 visits a night, both for men's and women's basketball. So there's certainly been impacts. I think it was pretty public when the Crowbar did a 2-month shutdown to control expenses. Another way that you see resilience in the business community, trying to find ways to stay open, stay alive, stay thriving. So I'm very proud of that. Additionally to this program, we talk in the committee meetings, we're talking a lot about access to because this was supposed to be that finer mesh Janine talked about. We talk about what access and how our businesses have been accessing the state programs. And then we're trying as best we can. The delay on the federal reporting is much slower. So we don't have as good a wash, but the local businesses have been able to access in excess of $3 million was the last count that we had in the state programs, and to help. And then at the federal level through payroll protection, SBA should generate a report. I think they're supposed to do that in the first quarter of this year, but I'm not sure. So that you can kind of have a regional breakdown. So we're doing a good job of catching that. And then we're trying to find places where the businesses can access very specific to their business, other funding in grant programs that have become available due to the COVID-19. We'll see another round of payroll protection that started with the approval that Congress did in the last week of the year. Those funds and application processes for payroll protection are just rolling out in this week. So we're assisting a lot of businesses in getting prepared to file for those. So it's a tough time. This has been a very successful program in catching the net. If you know of any business, constituent business, constituent sole proprietorship, constituent gig worker that needs the help, please refer them into the program so that we can continue to help people get access. What we find sometimes, if there's a gap, is that there's another program that's available that might even be a better fit and get them more money. So I think we've served about 70 businesses as a result of this program and helping them access resources and make adjustments. So it's been very successful to that and very successful to helping them tie into the state and federal programs. With that, I think probably the best way after that overview is to just stand for questions, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Enzi. I really appreciate that. And I already see some people seeking recognition. I think I just want to real quickly, before I get to Councilor Doherty, then Councilor Harrington, is just check and see, do we have anything that we want to touch on from the staff, just to go along with any of those comments? And I see Janine, City Manager, saying no. Okay, so let's just go right into questions. And thanks again, Brad. Councilmember O'Doherty, you're up.
Thank you. Mr. Enzi, thank you for this work. And have you had to turn down many applicants? And if so, it sounds like you were able to redirect people. Is there a common cause if people are rejected for grants? Thank you.
Mayor Weaver, Councilor O'Doherty, not really a common, there wouldn't be we get a lot that say we want the grant and then it doesn't fit in one category. Generally, it's been not providing the documentation and then finding another source, or it's really just been more of an administrative. I think there's been one that just didn't qualify, but I don't know that that I would draw that to any fine point. It's just been administratively how are they seeking, what are they seeking the funds for? But we haven't had a lot of denials in the grants. I think 3, and they just didn't fit the program. And then in the loans, it just came to, I think we've only had 2 of those, and they didn't fit the parameters of the program as defined by the council.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, you're muted, but I'm assuming you were.
Yes, indeed. I was calling on you and thanking Councilor Doherty. You're up.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Brad, I guess first would say thank you for making sure this program really stays flexible. That's one of the things that I've been hearing from constituents and business owners as they've sort of navigated all of the federal funding that, while incredibly significant and I think very helpful for keeping businesses afloat, did have pretty narrow parameters at times. I think this being so flexible was really crucial. I mean, being able to go to a business that I know is struggling and say, apply for this money, it's there for you, they'll help you through it, has been a pretty powerful thing to be able to do for a business. And so thank you for that. And thank you to the board that was, I think having those experts on the board is the reason that was a possibility, having professionals overview everything. So I guess my question would be, though, and thanks for humoring that, but my question would be, are you seeing any sort of shift as we're seeing businesses like the Crowbar? And I hope that they're the only one. I don't know that they will be the only one choosing to do a temporary closure, but as we're seeing that become more likely as this sort of wears on, are you seeing any sort of shift in what people are applying for? In discussing with Andy from the Crowbar, I understood that loans were not something he was particularly interested in at this point. Grants, certainly, but loans weren't as helpful because he didn't know what his financial future was going to look like. So sort of like kicking the can down the road was maybe not in his best interest. So I'm curious if you've seen any of that in a larger sense.
Mayor Weaver, Councilor Harrington, I think what we are seeing is everybody's trying to preserve as much capital as possible and really play that long game with the future being uncertain. I think the kind of the temporary shutdown, January and February tend to be our slowest months in the service industry. And so, that's a strategic play. We've heard other people talk about it, but haven't seen or heard beyond kind of that initial discussion, anybody act on it. We're certainly open down at the Alliance, and we've got through Josh Boudreau and Bailey, some real expertise in kind of both the cash management and service industry, and being able to sit down and strategically think through things. And we're always open to any business in town, not member based whatsoever. Sitting down and doing those counselings and helping people navigate that. My strengths tend to be more towards how do we access those other resources at the state and federal level. So I think we've got a really adept team. On that same note, where we're always willing to do that, the amount of time and administration that this has taken for our staff has been significant. I would say that it's certainly in the first weeks, Bailey probably put 10 to 20 hours a week on an ongoing basis. Now that we've kind of got the systems established, it's probably 5 to 7. She does the initial pass to make sure that we've checked all the boxes that we required through our joint agreement, and then we forward them up. So the staff has really stepped up this year in really non-traditional functions and not functions that were contracted or in our membership at all, to make sure that we assist through this crisis and, try to make sure that the different hits that the economy has taken, that we mitigate those as best we can. So I also want to point out there's been through this that Trey Sherwood's been a very active and aggressive participant for the downtown, and in combination with United Way and 5 local businesses, activated another about $30,000+ in grant money that was distributed. So that's been a nice addition and an even finer mesh around the businesses. So that was a very proactive thing. And I know that there was a crowd fund for Night Heron that I saw that raised some money through that method. So I think that just shows that resilience. And people are I think sometimes we're the last to know. So if we can get those references earlier, it's helpful so that we can help in the strategic part of thinking it through and coming up with some solutions.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Appreciate that. Looking at Councilmember Somerville.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question, and I'm not sure if it's for staff or Mr. Enzi. The parameters of this program, when you guys established it last year, does it include the smaller nonprofits? Are they eligible to come in and apply for this program as well, or do they have to be for-profit business?
Do you want me to take that one? Or?
Yeah, go ahead, Brad.
So it was structured to be, Mayor Weaver, Councilor Somerville, it was structured to be that finer mesh. And at the time of its inception, United Way had some nonprofit funding. And so we tried to use the different layers. It's not precluded by any means, but we tried to put them to the resource most adept to handle that at the time. So they're certainly not precluded. They're not excluded from participation in the program, but at the inception, we would refer them other places. So as those different sources have dried up, we've entertained far beyond, kind of the scope. To Councilor Harrington's comment, we've tried to stay very adaptable within the structure that the council approved to make sure that we could serve as many businesses and institutions as possible in town.
Thank you, Brad. I appreciate that, and thank you for all the work you and your staff have done on the program so far.
All right. Do we have any more questions on this topic? I see Councilor Harrington for a second time. Anybody else? Okay. Go ahead, Councilor Harrington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Enzi, is there anything in the resolution that, from your perspective, would prevent it from being used for reopening expenses in the sort of like the case of the crowbar? Is there anything that would preclude that?
Mayor Weaver, Councilor Harrington, I don't think so. I've got it up. I can't on this other screen. I can't see anything that would. Janine, can you think? I think that would be, as long as it's a business expense, which would include reopening expenses. I don't see anything that would exclude it from that. So.
Yeah, I would agree. Through you, Mayor, Councilmember Harrington, Brad and I have discussed those reopening expenses as the possibility. And what we saw is that there's nothing in the program, as Brad said, that would make those ineligible. And as he noted earlier, we've already covered things like rents, utilities. So I think that most of those would be in keeping with the spirit of the program for sure.
Great. I'm glad to hear that. And Mr. Mayor, if I could ask one more question, if nobody else has a second question or a first.
No, please, Brian.
Yeah, thank you. I would, I was looking at sort of the proportions of those two pools of funds, and they seem to be proportionally shrinking, which frankly, I didn't expect. I sort of thought those grants would run out the door and the loans would be far slower. I would be interested to know if you start to see one of those pools drying up before the other. I just would be curious to know. So not so much a question, I guess, and I apologize for that, Mr. Mayor.
It's all right.
Mr. Mayor,
yeah,
Mr. Harrington, I think one of the successes of this program is it's really a week to 10 days if an application is in full and good order to actual execution of the money. So the speed to which they can access, and really if a business, on Tuesday said they, crap, we've got a problem. On Wednesday had the paperwork in. On Thursday it would be out to the board, and on Friday afternoon could be distributed. So I think that's been a strength of it. And kind of to your comment, that still remains, and we would update the council should we see, the grants go at an accelerated amount or the loans, just because I think both would be, here's a small amount that we need help with right now, or, the loans, we're in it for the long haul, but, our problems are significant or our challenges are significant. So, Janine and I talk at least probably every other week, if not every week, and kind of hit on where the tides are going. So we'll keep the council updated through staff. Should we see a rapid acceleration in either one, we'll be able to be nimble at the right time.
Thank you, Brad. I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You bet, Councilmember Harrington. I'm not seeing anybody else. No one else. All right. I'll make just a quick observation and a comment. This program was put into place quickly when we developed it, and it didn't necessarily have the same amount of groundwork that another grant and business support program that we had a year to plan might have. But I'm glad to hear what we've heard and see the results that we've got back on this. And I appreciate the emphasis on the fact that we're going to try to stay dynamic with it and adapt it to the situation as the needs of the situation present themselves. I think that's probably the best way to make sure this money goes to where it needs to and the businesses that it needs to. So I really appreciate the emphasis that's been placed on that for us with this report. I don't see anybody else. I don't have anything else to say about this other than thank you very much for this update, and we look forward to the next one.
Thank you, Mayor. If I could, I'd like to really acknowledge, as Brad said, Bailey down at LCBA. She's done a ton of work on this, as has Brad, but we propped this up quickly, and it was largely burdensome on LCBA staff. So thank you, Brad.
Absolutely. Well, without seeing any other discussion here, I think probably we can go to our next work session if there's no objection. And I'm not seeing.
Mayor, I could do a quick introduction. This work session was requested by City Council. And I know that folks from the engineering section have a presentation prepared for you. And we also have Brooks Webb, our Public Works Director, with us. So I will let them take it from here.
Thank you, City Manager, for the brief introduction. And yep, I see Mr. Webb there.
Hi, Honorable Mayor, City Council. As Janine said, Council requested this work session. I really delegated this off to our resident experts in our engineering division. And so tonight our city engineer, Eric Japp, and our two civil engineers, Eric Milliken and William Winkler, are going to present tonight. They have a PowerPoint presentation prepared that we're going to try to load up here for you and share on the screen, I believe. And with that, I'll just let them take it away.
Great, thank you.
All right. Having a little technical issues here. Nancy, we're seeing a host has disabled sharing. Looks like there it goes, maybe. There we go. Can everyone see that there then?
Yeah.
All right, sounds good. This is our first full presentation on Zoom, so we use Zoom a lot, but a little bit of a learning curve. So, well, good evening, Your Honorable Mayor and members of Council. The City of Laramie Engineering Division is actually very excited to present tonight's work session to you on these topics, as it's subjects we actually enjoy. Because of there's such an interest, you're going to get to hear from three of us tonight. And before we begin, I'll let you know the plan, what we plan on covering, and then also some of the background on who will be presenting. So, next slide there, Eric, if you want to. Let's see. So, Eric Milliken will be presenting to you a brief introduction on speed limits, stop signs, and traffic calming. He'll then present to you a few different types of traffic calming devices as well. A little background on Eric. He actually has his master's degree in traffic engineering, and before working at the city, he worked in the private sector as a traffic engineer. Some of you will remember that Eric wrote a paper last year titled A Study of Local Gap Acceptance Behavior Using Drone Videography to the Western District Institute of Transportation Engineers Annual Conference. And this paper was not only selected for the conference, but he also won the Best Paper by a Young Professional Award. So this is quite an honor. It's been so well received actually by the transportation engineering community that he continues to be asked for follow-up presentations on the topic. William Winkler will be presenting existing traffic calming devices in Laramie and some proposed future ones, most of which he actually designed or was part of the project. And while William has a different background in traffic than Eric, it's just as impressive. Before coming to work at the city, he worked at YDOT, and as most of you know, YDOT does basically traffic engineering because that's what they do. So this experience has given knowledge and a diverse background, which makes him a great asset for the city's engineering traffic program. Between Eric, William, and myself, we bring 4 years of traffic engineering experience to the city through different backgrounds. And now, before I turn it over to Eric, I did want you to know that we're more than happy to answer questions as we go through this presentation, and we'll try to watch for questions as we present, though that may be difficult in Zoom, so feel free to interrupt us or do something to try to get our attention. And then, of course, we'll always have time for questions at the end as well. With that, I'll turn the presentation over to Eric Milliken.
Thanks, Eric. I just want to quickly on that questions thing, council members, I think maybe given that that's the way they want to do that, feel free to just unmute and jump in as you can. And it's on Zoom, so it'll be a little stilted, but we'll do our best with that. Will that work for all you presenters?
Yeah, that'll be fine.
Okay, great. All right, thanks a lot.
Great. All right, so I'm going to go over, I'm going to go over a brief introduction to speed limits, stop signs, and traffic calming, kind of like what we're looking for as engineers when we install these items and when we're analyzing intersections and places where there may be a need for certain speed limits or traffic calming measures. And I'll also be going over some types of traffic calming later. And so how are speed limits established here in the city of Laramie? Well, we have a citywide speed study that was done in 2015, and we feel this is still relevant today, even though it's 6 years old. The speed study recommends the city use the 85th percentile of the data collected from the corridor, from each corridor, to determine what the speed limit should be set at. The 85th percentile is the speed at which, after they collect data from multiple vehicles using the corridor, what is the speed that 85% of the vehicles are going? And for the city of Laramie, that's usually around 30 miles an hour, and that's what we saw in the report as well. Most roads, the recommended speed limit is 30 miles an hour, and any local roads that were measured as part of this project, the recommended speed limit was actually 25 miles an hour. And so that's where we see some of the reduction from our typical speed limit of 30 is on the local roads, no collectors or arterials, which I'll show in a later slide. And the purpose of using this 85th percentile really is to reduce the amount of enforcement needed. 50% of the people are going over the speed limit. We don't. That's not an enforcement we would like to see. And this is really a universal method for determining speed limits. And studies have shown that regardless of the speed limit, vehicles will travel at a reasonable speed anyways. So, but is there an appropriate time to not use the 85th percentile? It's most commonly, this is most commonly a method for local roads and residential neighborhoods, areas where there's so many roads in the city, we can't do a speed study on every single one of them, unfortunately. And so we usually pick a speed we feel is appropriate for a local or residential neighborhood. I believe right now that's at 30 miles an hour in code. And usually our design speed we use when we're designing local and residential is around 20 or 25. This is usually where we see traffic calming if we want a lower speed limit, because the traffic calming helps encourage vehicles to drive a slower speed. And so this traffic calming helps to lower the 85th percentile in a way. And if traffic calming isn't available and it's not a local or residential neighborhood, usually we need to see higher enforcement. And we can work with the police department on enforcement if that needs to be done. In terms of stop signs, we follow the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices. This is a national standard for engineers when that they use to install signs, all signs basically. There's a lot of instructions in this book on how signs should be installed and when they should be installed. In terms of stop control, in terms of a two-way stop control application, this is the language it gives for it. In general, there needs to be a certain amount of vehicles going through the intersection per day. There needs to be a restricted view that exists that vehicles need to be able to stop in order to observe conflicting traffic. Basically, when they approach the intersection, they can't see vehicles coming the other way, and so they would need to stop anyways. Or if there's a crash history at the intersection. And for the city of Laramie, it's very old, and obviously these standards haven't been in place for as old as the city of Laramie has been, and so we're going to have some uncontrolled intersections, unfortunately. And for those intersections, we assume that they're designed to the standards of the time. And so the engineers weren't wrong in putting in uncontrolled intersections at the time. That's just what the standards were at the time. And since then, the standards have tightened up to include more safety and efficiency at intersections. And engineering is always willing to investigate citizen concerns on stop signs in the city. We take those seriously, and we try to fit it into our schedules when we can. So what is traffic calming? Basically, what we're looking at for traffic calming is devices within the roadway that create friction between the roadway and the vehicles driving on the roadway. You can see a list here. I won't go through all of it. I'll go through each one individually a little later. But one item that is not included is stop signs. Stop signs cannot be used as traffic calming. Studies have shown that stop signs, when they're used for the purposes of traffic calming, often increase violations at the intersection and may increase crashes at the intersection for people just rolling through the stop sign because they don't feel like they want to stop. And so it also reduces the need for speed enforcement because it helps that friction between the vehicles and the roadway devices helps slow the vehicles down. And it helps improve safety and visibility between vehicles and pedestrians and bicycles. These pictures you see here are great candidates for traffic calming measures like bulb outs or some complete street measures. We don't want pedestrians to have to walk into the street and look around parked vehicles in order to see if it's safe to cross. We want them to feel safe behind a curb and gutter system, and that's what bulb outs do. In addition, they create the visibility for the pedestrian in addition to creating that friction with the drivers on the roadway. And as far as the bicycle lane is concerned, that's obviously that bike lane is too small, and the traveled way for the vehicles looks a little too wide. So we could look at narrowing up the street and maybe making it wider, maybe creating a buffer zone for the bicycle. And all of this creates an environment for vehicle that encourages vehicles to drive at a slower speed. And so when is traffic calming appropriate? It's appropriate in a lot of situations, but we need to take into consideration some aspects of our street network system, like the difference between an arterial collector and a local road. This is the master street plan for the city of Laramie. Any street that is colored is a arterial or collector, and the purpose of these colored streets are to move vehicles efficiently and safely. And so we need to take into consideration before we install traffic calming measures in these areas, whether or not they hinder the performance of the street, as opposed to local streets where traffic calming measures are most likely going to be used, where the purpose of a local street is to get a person to their destination. And so most likely we see, most often I should say, we see traffic calming devices on local streets, but we do also see them on arterials and collectors, but we need to take the fact that they are arterials and collectors into consideration. Other small items to consider before putting in traffic calming devices: it increases cost and time for our streets division in terms of snow removal and maintenance of the intersection. The streets division currently plows the snow off to the side, and so when you have bulb outs, for instance, where that takes up the place of where the snow should be plowed, that costs them some time to move that snow around. And we need to take into consideration whether there's conflicts with underground or above ground utilities. If we need to consider maintenance of those underground utilities. If we're putting concrete over those utilities and the utilities need to be maintained, that's an additional cost to the city. We also need to take into consideration stormwater drainage. A lot of these intersections, the curb radii on each of the four corners are usually designed to handle stormwater at a minimum slope or close to. And so putting in curb bulb outs would actually flatten that slope a little bit and may add some ponding around the intersection, which we obviously don't want, because ponding leads to icing over leads to pedestrian safety issues. And so that's another thing we need to consider when we have bulb outs. And also the effect on on-street parking. Any bulb out or median or neck down or any traffic calming measure may reduce the amount of on-street parking available. And so that's an item we may need to consider. So now I'm going to go over the fun part, all the different types of traffic calming devices. So now we got that out of the way, let's go over some traffic calming devices. So these items, traffic calming measures, you can see them all on the NACDO website, the National Association of City Transportation Officials. They have great guidance on where all of these traffic calming devices can be put in and what they should look like and how they should be, what their purpose should be. And so first one we'll be talking about here is a speed hump. And I'll just read the definition from the NACDO website because I think it summarizes it up greatly. Speed humps are parabolic vertical traffic calming devices intended to slow traffic speed on low volume, low speed roads. And so this is I would consider an extreme traffic calming measure. This this forces vehicles to slow to a very slow speed. We're looking, when it says low speed roads, we're talking 15, 20 miles an hour. And so these should be used in rare cases on low volume, low speed roads, like the NACTO says. In terms of raised intersections and raised crosswalks, these should be treated the same as speed humps. These should be in low volume, low speed areas with the added benefit of pedestrian visibility. And another item to consider when we're doing these speed humps or raised intersection or raised crosswalk designs is vehicle clearance, to make sure that that speed hump does not bottom out most vehicles. And so that would be another consideration we would have here for raised intersections, raised crosswalks, or speed bumps. Another more common item is our neck down and bulb outs. These are pedestrian friendly visibility traffic calming measures which create a pinch point really for drivers on a road that causes them to slow down, and it helps with the visibility of the pedestrian for them to cross, and it gives them a shorter distance to cross as well, which is great for signal efficiency. We don't have to have that pedestrian crossing light on as long if we have a shorter crossing distance. However, we also need to consider the types of vehicles that will be going through these intersections. For instance, high semi-truck volume may be a consideration we would need to look at because they need a wide turning radius in order to make those corners, and a bulb out in some cases does not accommodate those as well. Next, we have speed feedback signs. These are rising in popularity in a lot of places as a traffic calming measure. They show effectiveness in slowing down vehicles and reducing the number of speeding violations. However, they are expensive, $10,000 for a trailer, $5,000 for a sign, where we're looking at a typical speed limit, a regular typical speed limit sign, we're looking in the hundreds of dollars. So it's an expensive option, but it has shown to be effective in reducing speed on corridors where there are speeding issues. Another traffic calming device I'll talk about today is the median islands. This is similar to bulb outs and neck downs, except the concrete's in the middle of the road instead of on the side of the road, creating a pinch point for vehicles to slow them down and really take a look at pedestrians crossing. It's best used as a refuge island for large crossings if needed, and you usually need a center turn lane in order to accommodate it. If you're looking at a 4-lane road, you have to have time and space in order to widen that road to 5 lanes, add the median, and then narrow the road back to 4 lanes, which is more difficult to accommodate a median in that way. And all these items really do, the neck down, the bulb outs, the medians, they really just narrow drive lanes and create that friction between the roadway and the user. But it's really difficult to enforce these narrow drive lanes through striping. It really needs to be done through concrete and infrastructure. Because in the winter, especially in Laramie in the winter, people will drive where they're most comfortable. Another item for traffic calming measures is traffic circles or mini roundabouts, which are not to be confused with standard roundabouts. Standard roundabouts are much larger, and their purpose is as a traffic control device, like a traffic signal or stop sign. They're meant to improve the efficiency and the safety at an intersection, whereas a traffic circle can be built into the middle of an existing 4-legged intersection and act as a traffic calming measure. It's according to NACTO, it's a great way to treat uncontrolled intersections because people on all 4 legs are already used to slowing down to look all ways at the intersection. And so adding a traffic circle, adding that additional friction for that vehicle will slow them down a little more and add a little efficiency to the intersection because now they only have to look to the left instead of the left, the right, and in front of them. The last item I'll talk about in terms of traffic calming is a common one, especially for corridors with a lot of signals, traffic signal coordination. I can't speak for Whiteout. I believe they do this on 3rd Street. It's a way of timing the signals so that the speed of the vehicles matches the speed limit when they hit the green lights on the corridor. So If you drive too fast between two signals, you're going to get a red light and you'll have to slow down. So that encourages you to just drive the speed limit because you're going to be hitting a red light at the next intersection anyways. And so that is the final type of traffic calming measures. There's some more out there, I believe, that I did not include that are a little more rare, but these are the most common types of traffic calming devices. I'll turn it over to William now. He's going to go over our existing traffic calming devices here in Laramie and some proposed ones we'll see in the future. William?
Thank you,
Eric. Oh, there you are. Great.
Thank you, Mayor. With that, I'm just going to go over a few of the actual devices we have implemented in town. There's a couple of installations that I've helped work on. Our office kind of might be a little bit rare. I don't know a lot of engineering offices that enjoy kind of implementing these designs, but we definitely are willing to listen and try and go out and make these designs happen to increase safety and accommodate the public's needs. So go ahead, Eric. First example, back in 2016, staff worked with Laramie Plains Museum to implement striping. This was on a request to increase parking in the area. The back and diagonal parking was installed on 6th and 7th Street. As a result of this design, we narrowed the lanes from 17 foot to 12.5 foot drive lanes. This has the effect of slowing the traffic in the area where we have quite a bit of pedestrian movement with the church, the Laramie Plains Museum, and the apartment in the area. So it had the desired effect that's from what we've witnessed. Another one is 30th Street and Willett Drive. This was a capital construction project where we installed the traffic signal back in 2015. With the design, bulb outs were installed. As you can see in the picture there, there's a pathway on the south side of the intersection. That pathway extends to the east over to, I'm going to get the name wrong now because it's changed a few times, but it was the Verge at one time. But with that, the bulb outs allow the pedestrians to have a shorter distance to cross, which increases the signal's efficiency as well as the pedestrian's safety in crossing. Another bulb out installation is 18th and Rainbow. This installation came about because of the traffic volumes that go to Washington Park. It's a great scenario for bulb outs because it's a local street, local on both sides. Washington Park does get quite a bit of foot traffic. Freedom Has a Birthday is there. Another concern we had in this area that was brought up by the residents is the amount of speed on 18th Street. There are no stop signs between Grand Avenue and Sheridan. So it's quite a long stretch for no interruptions due to the intersection. So by necking this down in this intersection, it definitely causes the traffic to be aware and slow down a little bit. Those were just a few of the items that we've had go on so far. But we do have some others that are being proposed through development and capital construction. Quite a while back now, we had a conceptual plan that we worked with. Tri-Hydro did the conceptual plan, but we worked with the university to come up with a plan along Ivinson Avenue. This section mostly focused on 9th to 15th Street, but it came up as a good option because it's a local road, or it's a low speed limit road, 20 miles an hour in that section. And it's kind of the start of our connection between the university and the downtown area. So we wanted to start that connection. With this, we've looked into, go back to Eric real quick. We looked into bulb outs, raised intersection at 15th and Ivinson, raised crosswalks at a number of the crossings. Just with the number of areas that the pedestrians can access Ivinson Avenue, there's a lot of different things that you could implement in this area that would increase safety. Willett Drive was brought to staff's attention as possibly having a speeding issue. It's been mentioned to us multiple times and been presented even at Traffic Commission as a concern. The Willett Drive is a roadway that is planned to be a capital construction project in the future. So with this, we're looking into a traffic calming measure such as a neck down up on the top of the hill that would also help pedestrians be able to cross the roadway and access the Jacoby Ridge Trail that's been established in the area. So it'll have a double purpose. We do have to be careful on that one as that's a higher classification roadway, so we want to not limit the traffic too much. An example of us working with development to implement traffic calming is over in a preliminary plat for Truman Street Estates. We noticed that there was a 1,000-foot section of roadway that had no intersection and causes the traffic to slow down or anything like that. So it's in UDC that if it's over 600 foot, we need to have some kind of calming device there. And the staff worked with the developer to come up with the design of a bulb out and neck down type installation. The goal of this installation is to create narrower section of roadway that would help reduce vehicle speeds through the residential neighborhood. So it's supposed to help safety with the pedestrians crossing at that section too. The last one that I'm going to talk about is one that you guys probably know a little bit more, is the 3rd Street design. Within the 3rd Street design, we've talked about medians, we've talked about bulb outs along the area of the downtown area. The design, we're trying to use quite a bit of finesse on this design to increase pedestrian safety and not impact the functionality of the adjacent business frontages and the state highway. It's a tightrope to walk on that because the installation of medians and the bulb outs directly affects parking, directly affects other things along the roadway, but it definitely has a significant increase to pedestrian safety. So they're being installed, or they're planned to be installed as part of that project. Eric, you can take it away.
All right. Well, thank you, Eric and William, for that information. As we conclude tonight's presentation, I want to note that, traffic calming is great, and we're always looking for ways that we can apply it. But as you've kind of seen by some of the examples and looking at that, it isn't a one-size-fits-all approach to an area. And there are several factors we need to keep in mind as we look at before installing it into a location. In regard to speed, we use the 2015 citywide speed study as a reference and a guideline, and we're always open, though, to studying specific areas of Laramie if needed. And these studies would analyze what is best for the area and determine if any changes are needed and how they should be applied to improvements. And finally, William kind of knows this at engineering. We're always looking and always open to find new ideas, concepts, and ways to make things better. We're always striving to make Laramie a safer place while also improving how it functions. And any one of us are always looking for ways to improve Laramie's traffic, and are always more than happy to talk to any city staff or citizens about concerns they have in traffic and ultimately work with them to find a winning solution in the area. So with that kind of concludes our presentation that we had prepared, and we're definitely open for any questions that you may have regarding anything we talked about tonight or anything else in general as well.
Thanks, Eric. What a great presentation. I think that was very, very informative. I see Councilor Cumby nodding there too, and I can't think of a better introduction for some of the traffic engineering things that our staff works on than this little primer here. And I think I saw people, Councilor Doherty, why don't you just go right ahead?
Right. Now that I see, all the problems with things like bulb outs and because of snow and water, runoff and ice, that we have to be careful about that. It makes me go back to my original thing that I'm a big fan of the speed feedback signals, even though they're expensive compared to bulb outs and the other things, it seems like it might be a good deal. And the places that I'm thinking about, we've had the complaints about Willett, but also coming into town from any of the state highways, people have been driving fast, and then to get their attention, I know it helps me when I see those signs, that because you're just used to going at a faster rate and don't realize that you're going too fast. So it's something I'd like to consider for entering into town to get people's attention. So what do you think about that? Thanks.
Your Honorable Mayor, Councilor Doherty, we could definitely look into that. It does come as a cost, as we noted, especially with the highways coming in. As you're noting, probably like 3rd Street, Grand Avenue, East Snowy Range Road, that's probably where we're going to see those highways that you're mentioning. We'd have to have discussions with YDOT on that in order to enact that. We have a good working relationship with YDOT, but that ultimately is their road and their decision on whether they'd want to put those in and how that would work. So that would be something, if we ended up pursuing that we'd have to talk to YDOT and collaborate with them for that to be installed.
Thank you.
Let's go with Councilor Stalder, then Councilor Harrington.
Thank you, Mayor. There's one section on Snowy Range that I was just curious if you did the speed study, like right when you come off the bridge and it goes around that like curve. I know the speed limit changes a couple times, and your 85% thing just made me wonder if you had done a study there. I know a lot of people that have gotten tickets because the speed limit changes a couple times right through there.
Your Honorable Mayor, Councilor Stalder, that again is a YDOT road. I know that they looked at that to a degree, but I can't remember any of the specifics on that. I'll ask either Eric or Will if you remember. William is a little bit more involved in that project than I was. I can't remember some of the specifics on that. Do you guys remember anything on that?
Eric, yeah, so as part of the preliminary design process for YDOT, they select a design criteria speed. And so that's based on traffic counts that they do annually. So it is difficult in that area because there was no roadway to go from, but they would have taken the information that they got from the previous Clark Street alignment and then tried to apply it to this situation.
Gotcha. Thank you. Yeah, on the previous Clark Street, you were kind of in residential, so you weren't going so fast, but it's easy to start picking up speed on the bridge and around that corner. So whatever the speed limit is, it's just weird that it changes so many times. But thank you very much.
Yeah, that is an interesting speed transition area. Hey, Councilor Harrington, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm curious about a few sort of more specific calming measures for like heavy pedestrian intersections. Certainly, don't mistake what I'm saying as we should put bulb outs at 9th and Grand on our lovely new street. But there are a few intersections, I would say, like 4th and Sheridan, 9th and Grand, 3rd and Grand, that have significant pedestrian movement. And I'm curious if there are, short of infrastructure changes, anything we can do to increase sort of like pedestrian safety. I think people turning on those intersections are at increased risk if you are a pedestrian. So I'm curious if you all have any recommendations for an intersection like that.
Your Honorable Mayor, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to add, this might be the wrong, this might not be the direction you're going, so don't let me sway you. But I've seen before, like, I don't know if anybody uses those like bright orange flags that you can walk across the street with, but I'm thinking sort of more in that direction.
Your Honorable Mayor, Councilor Harrington, I mean, obviously, as we kind of looked about the bulb outs are probably the best for those areas. We looked at them at 3rd and Grand, and it was with YDOT, and it was more YDOT's design. Many of those roads, again, you mentioned, are YDOT's roads. And I believe that there are some bulb outs at like 3rd and Grand when that's moving forward, but it was very difficult to fit the bulb outs in, and they weren't as large probably as some people would have liked, just because of you have to accommodate large vehicle turning movements in that area too. So that there's that. As Eric noted earlier, striping is difficult to do. In that that would probably be the other low cost solution. There really isn't a whole lot in ways of signage. So I mean, there's things. I don't want to be negative on it, but really to get that safety factor, we may have to look at infrastructure probably to fully address what you're trying to do. If the signal's signalized, there's options to adjust the timing of it to allow pedestrians more time to cross. Actually, when a signal is timed, engineers actually have an average speed of a walking person, and say you're by a retirement home or something like that, where you may have elderly people that maybe aren't going to be able to cross as slow, or if you like a square area where they're not going to be maybe as crossing as fast or need more time, you would increase that time at that signalized intersection to allow for that, which that's one way to help with that safety, so they're not as rushed through there. I'm kind of drawing a little bit of blank on like low cost solutions like holding up a flag. There's crossing guards obviously you can have at schools. There are some things that you probably have seen around, as I think of schools around UW and also our school district. They put the little pedestrian crossing signs out in the middle of the road. Those are portable, and those actually were run through several years ago through the Engineering and Traffic Commission, and those are maintained either by UW or the school district, and they kind of put them in and put them out every day. And that's just basically a sign that is moved out to the intersection. So that's great where you have someone to maintain those, around a school or UW or something like that. But that's quite a bit of work for like city staff to go out and, 4th and Sheridan every day to take and take down and put up the sign. So, so there are maybe some options that we could look at. I'm kind of drawing a little bit blank. Eric or William, do you have anything that you could maybe think of on that might be some other options?
Yeah, just to address the flag carrying, I know in Salt Lake City they use that for their large one-way roads, like 4 or 5 lane one-way roads, and it's been proven to be effective for pedestrian safety and visibility. In terms of traffic calming, though, we're still not seeing that friction there. I mean, if the goal is for pedestrian visibility and safety purely, it's a great option. It's a cheap option for sure, and it's been proven to be effective. In terms of slowing vehicles down, though, to accommodate pedestrian safety, it's not as much, but it is a good, effective option for pedestrian safety. And in terms of signalized intersections, there are some signals in the city that actually prioritize pedestrians first before they change their phase to a different street. I think it's 3rd and I want to say University. If you're waiting at that intersection to cross, the University crosswalk will go first while the signal stays red to allow pedestrians to go into the intersection first, which creates more visibility for the drivers that are stopped waiting for the signal. And that's another cost-effective way for pedestrian visibility.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mayor, Councilor Harrington, I did have one other thing I was thinking of. We've also looked at crosswalks at those areas, improving the crosswalk striping. Tolkien and Reynolds, you may have seen the crosswalks are actually painted red, the dyed concrete in there, and that kind of helps pop that out, that crossing, but obviously that's infrastructure as well. So.
Councilor
Thank
Cumby. Oh, thank you, Councilor Harrington. Thank you, Mr. Japp. Go ahead, Councilor Cumby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really appreciate your presentation. I found it very helpful, especially as a new city council person. My question is, I'm wondering if concerns have been brought to your attention regarding 15th Street, especially south of Grand to Spring Creek, that strip right in there. It seems that ever since, over the past 10 years, traffic has increased dramatically. It seems that there's quite a bit of speeding. It's become difficult sometimes when families do a lot of walking from the west side of 15th Street to Washington Park, and they have to cross 15th Street. And as you were talking about 18th Street, you know, being a place where there can be pedestrian problems due to walking to Washington Park and Washington Park use. I find the same thing going on the west side as people attempt to cross 15th to the east to Washington Park. And then the third thing that happens, especially in the evening and night, is Sheridan to Spring Creek is a drag strip. And so as soon as the light changes, motorcycles and, you know, race cars, they'll see how fast they can go from, you know, in that space. And so I'm just wondering if those have been brought to your attention, if there's any consideration of, for instance, crosswalks with 15 along 15th Street, possibly at Sheridan, at Park, at someplace where people can more easily cross over. Have there been traffic studies, etc.? I'm just wondering that.
Honorable Mayor, Councilmember Coombe, I'll take a shot at answering your question here. Actually, right now we have a design out for 15th Street between Sheridan Street and Grand Avenue to do some roadway improvements in this section. With that, we've looked at the intersections pretty closely, and one of the dynamics that we have there is that the intersections don't line up. They aren't across from each other very directly, so it doesn't allow for a very good ADA route. And when we go and put a crosswalk in, we have to have pretty good ADA in that area. Otherwise, we do direct them to the signals, which does seem to be out of the way, but it does increase the safety. So we're hoping that people do utilize the signals as much as possible to cross, because that is the safest option. Otherwise, we are looking at some different options in there, but with the offset in the intersections, it's pretty difficult to install crosswalks in that section. One thing I have noticed, I've lived in that area, I've been around that quite a bit, that same situation that you're talking about, Councilmember Coombe, and it does seem very fast. The 30 mile an hour section seems fast because there's a lot of information for people to kind of try and process in this area with the parked vehicles, the intersections, and just a lot of inputs there. I think if we put any kind of other kind of signal in there, we don't have the spacing with Sheridan Street signal, the Spring Creek signal, and the Grand Avenue signal. We try not to. We need to allow spacing for them to work together too. So it is difficult to put them in there, but we are looking into it, I guess is the short answer.
Do you think then it would be more of an enforcement issue, especially with the speeding and things like that?
I definitely think it would be something that would be monitored that way more so. I think the volume of traffic is more of the concern there. Is you don't have as many gaps as you would expect. Even if they were slower speeds, you just have a lot of vehicles on the roadway at one time.
Thank you very much.
Great. Good questions. Councilor Gabriel, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just curious. I've been trying to do double duty here, keeping our signal on the air. Have you guys talked about four-way stops?
Your Honorable Mayor, Councilor Gabriel, no, we didn't get into a whole lot of detail on four-way stops. We talked about the two-way stops a little bit earlier. Four-way stops are also, you know, they have a little bit of criteria in the manual uniform traffic control devices than the two-way stop showed, and actually to put in a four-way stop sign, you start even to approach some of the criteria of a signalized intersection. Not fully that way, but there is a criteria very similar, but with maybe additional things. I can't think off the top of my head. Eric Milliken may. We kind of joke that he's our walking manual and uniform traffic control devices because he knows it far more inside and out than I do, and maybe he can kind of add a little bit more to that and kind of do a little bit better job impromptu on that.
Sure, yeah. So similar to two-way stop control intersections, in terms of traffic calming, we would see an increase in violations if we were to put in. We may see an increase in violations, and we may see an increase in crashes at the intersection if our purpose of putting in an all-way stop sign would be to calm traffic. If I could use an extreme example here, if we were to make 7th and Grand Avenue a an all-way stop, even though there's more traffic on Grand Avenue and less traffic on 7th Street, we may see a rise in violations on Grand Avenue because they would just roll the stop sign because there's nobody they're waiting for on the other side anyways, and there's so much traffic coming on Grand Avenue. And then we may see an increase in crashes from people coming from 7th Street going on to Grand Avenue because the people on Grand Avenue are violating the stop sign. And so it's really putting in an all-way stop is really a efficiency and a way to improve efficiency at an intersection that really sees an equal amount of high volume, but not so much high volume that it warrants a signal.
Great, thank you. Mr. Mayor, I have another question, but I got to go do another break. So go ahead and continue. Maybe I'll come back and we'll see where everybody is.
I think Councilor Gabriel needs a double thanks for doing 2 forms of public service, keeping public radio on the air for all of us, serving on the city council. I'll let him get to a question when he gets back. Any other questions on this? A lot of interesting questions here, and this is really a good and unique opportunity to kind of dig into some of this when we're not doing it specifically directed towards an agenda item that's coming up, and I really appreciate it. Something I recall is that the League of Women Voters in 2018, some other council members may remember this as well. This was one of the questions that they asked of folks running for city council, what their plans were with regard to traffic control measures. And I'm not sure what generated that, if it was that it was the feeling of that organization that there had been a number of traffic concerns and pedestrian traffic concerns that were raised. I think I might ask a question about our process for when community members feel that there's an intersection or maybe a series of intersections that are in a region that are less safe than they could be, and what our steps would be. I would assume, but I'm gonna look to the staff here, but I'm gonna prime the question by saying I would assume that would be something that we would start with our traffic commission at this point in time, and then hear those concerns out, and then determine whether or not there are further steps that need to be taken. Am I generally correct there, Mr. Japp, or is there another process that we might encourage people to use?
Your Alma Mayor, probably the best starting place is actually to reach out to the city engineering division as that first step. Ultimately that may end up at traffic commission, and especially bigger items definitely will, and things like that. But if it's a minor issue or something like that, we may be able to address it in-house within a matter of days. But if it's a larger issue, like, one of the things that's recently come up is we had a member of the community reach out to us about the Grandview Heights area. In that area, they were concerned with stop signs in that area and kind of where they are and how they function and everything else. So actually we were that request, and we're actually looking at the entire Grandview Heights area. That's a study that we're doing in-house, and determining where stop signs shall be added in the improvements in that area to kind of look at that. And then that's, that one will probably go to the Traffic Commission with that, obviously. That started before Traffic Commission had reconvened. Our first meeting on Traffic Commission in a year's, I think this week actually, but we had started that one internally. So really the best approach if someone has a concern is to start with the city engineering division, reach out to us. We can look at it and figure out the best approach, and ultimately, even if it does end up at Traffic Commission, as a lot of them will, that engineering usually prepares all those items before it goes to Traffic Commission and has those items out, and then it's kind of discussed at Traffic Commission. We'd handle any notification that's needed, additional communication with residents in that area, along with that, but that's probably the easiest starting place.
I appreciate that, and it's not uncommon for members of the council to receive an email from a resident or a constituent that says something along the lines of, boy, I've really noticed this intersection at X and Y can be scary, and this happened to me there, and so forth. So what I'm hearing is that in general, that's the type of inquiry that our engineering department is comfortable having forwarded onto them, or having folks contact them about that so they can provide an answer and some feedback when we get those types of inquiries. I think that's what I just heard you lay out is probably the preferred thing to do. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, we get lots of requests all the time on that. They range from, like the large of the Grandview Heights all the way down to installing a permanent handicap parking sign at a location, or time parking, or anything along that. So we get quite a variety of those, and those are very easy for us to start to address, and we work with other departments very well on those items.
Appreciate that, and that's good to know, and that's kind of valuable information that comes out of just being able to really dig in a little bit and ask questions like we're doing tonight. Councilor Gabriel, I know you said you had a question and you're back, so I think I don't see anybody else right now with a hand up, so I think fire away.
Great, thank you, appreciate that. I was just curious, Eric, you talked about collaboration in your initial presentation with YDOT, streets like 3rd and Grand, of course, and I was just curious how that collaboration, how much they rely on city for questions and concerns on those particular, even though they have jurisdiction there, how much you guys really work together on those particular areas with YDOT?
Your Honorable Mayor, Council Gabriel, it kind of depends on the item that's coming forward. We've had someone wants to maybe do like a time parking on that street or something like that. We may run that through kind of ours, but then it's going to go under YDOT review at the same time as that's going on. The designs that have been done on 3rd, Grand, E.B. Curtis, the Harney Street Viaduct, those were all done with close collaboration with the city. We're invited to all the design review meetings. We're working with the YDOT team on getting those projects designed, and they definitely, it's definitely a team effort. It's a YDOT project, and understood and everything, but it's very much a team effort. So, I guess in summary, to answer that question, is it really just depends on the item that's going forward on that. The other thing that we do have is we have a monthly meeting with YDOT. So a lot of times Janine, Brooks, and myself, and whoever else needs to be there, meet with several of the YDOT personnel. And we kind of have an ongoing discussion on projects at that time too. So there's quite a bit of collaboration that goes on with YDOT on a regular basis to get that handled. Probably like with these speed signs, we'd probably bring it up with having those the signs, the flashing signs coming into town. We'd probably just start that conversation, and this is probably my approach to it. And actually, we'll probably do it this Friday when we have our meeting, is just discuss that with them and see kind of what options that we may need to have to move forward with that, and how the process that we could work on that together to make that happen in the future.
Great, thank you.
Good questions. Good questions. Anyone else for our engineering staff? I want to say again, Councilor Stalder, please.
Thank you. This isn't so much a question as a comment. I think you guys do a great job. The principal of my son's school reached out to me about traffic patterns related to COVID because they had to change like the drop-off situation, and it was creating a traffic nightmare. And I reached out. You guys contacted the school board. You guys do an awesome job. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Definitely want to echo that. I totally agree. I see Judy looking to ask a question, and I think this is an appropriate time. Why don't you go ahead?
Okay. My question has to do with potential disaster and planning for what's going to happen when the high school puts the road across Bill Nye with many students, many faculty and family dropping into Corthell Road. And what provisions, what is happening to protect that? It's a busy road as it is, with some high speeds going up the hill and down the hill. So I just don't know whether or not this is yours or is YDOT's, but I just want somebody to think about it.
Your Honorable Mayor, through you. So we do have the project that is coming up in the future. That's a USAC project, and that's WDOT is designing that, but the city is very much a part of the design of that project and working with WDOT on that one. That project will connect Boulder to 19th Street, which ultimately connects all the way down to 15th Street. So that will get that connection. In addition to that project, we will be connecting on to Corthell Hill.
Yes.
You know, we're aware of it. We don't have any direct plans right now. Still kind of looking at the traffic patterns. Definitely when the road is done and as it moves forward, we'll be monitoring that, especially that Spring Creek and Corthell Hill intersection. Seeing if any changes need to be done to that four-way stop at this time, and just trying to figure out really what improvements may need to be made. So you know, it's something that we're aware of and thinking on. We don't have any direct plans right now. Also with that, I will note though in the future that 30th Street is also on the USAC plan. Now that one's not under design yet, but that will help connect that to 30th to Bill Nye, and have that connection, which is going to help relieve that congestion onto Corthell Hill. So, you know, that's probably one of the long term of trying to get that north-south traffic going at that location versus dumping it all onto Corthell Hill and dumping it out there. You know, we can do some predicting of what's going to play out on that and try to account for it the best we can, and definitely monitor it. But you know, until we kind of see how many like high school students, as you noted, or access, you know, sometimes it's a little bit difficult. You know, we don't want to go spend $500,000 on putting in a new signal that may actually not be needed at a location or things like that. And I'll kind of open that one up to William or Eric and see if they had anything else to add on that as well.
Nothing from me. I think you did a good job there.
No, Eric, I think one thing that we definitely have a hard time really wrapping your head around is that it's a major roadway that we're trying to establish with Bill Nye from Boulder to 19th. The one thing that we do need to also be aware of is traffic is kind of interesting. It does like to go to the path of least resistance. So as you go in this you will have times where that increases the traffic on Corthell, causes some congestion, but over time does that release. do they then determine that the 15th Street route is a better option because they can move along faster? So it's going to take some time to really see the effects of this roadway. And I think the big part is making that connection all the way over to 15th. If we stopped at Corthell, then there's only one option, and then we are forcing it. So right now the plan is to connect all the way to 15th.
Okay. Well, the 30th Street connection would require a new bridge to be built to cross the creek to extend 30th Street south. So that's a whole nother issue.
Mayor, through you, we actually do have a bridge across Spring Creek at that location. That was put in with the point. So we have a bridge already in there. So it would just be basically running it directly from just south of that bridge to tie into Bill Nye.
I see. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor, for letting me do this.
No, absolutely. I really appreciate it, Judy, and good questions. And thanks to our staff for giving that a very thorough response. I think these are the kinds of things you think about them as you're driving around and you look at an area, and then maybe you think later, I had heard they're going to expand or connect this somewhere, and I'm just not sure how that's going to work. So it's a good opportunity. I don't see other hands up, and I know that the presentation that you all provided with us tonight, which I thought was a good one, is available through the city's agenda page. I think that would be good to make sure that's accessible and available to people, because I think it provides a nice set of answers and an overview on some of these things. And I can say that, speaking from experience as a member of the council, when we have a lot of major changes coming in terms of things that might affect our traffic patterns, the city always tries to make a very serious effort to engage the public, get public input about future plans and where things are going to go and how folks feel about those things. And I know we'll continue to do that as well. I appreciate what Mr. Winkler said there about following the path of least resistance. In a very real way, traffic is kind of like water that way. As patterns establish themselves, people may start to avoid certain streets and pathways at some times and start taking others. And when you change something in that system, it can change all of those other things. That's what I've noticed, and it's interesting how that works. But I'll just say again, I really appreciate this work session tonight. I think it's been valuable. I'm not seeing any other hands here, so I'm not sure if we're at that point where we want to conclude this work session and move on to the next portion of our meeting. But I'll just double check and make sure there isn't anyone else from the public. And one last time for members of the council that wants to ask anything about this while we have our people here. And it doesn't appear that we do. Well, without seeing any, I'll just say one more thank you, and we'll go ahead and get on to the next portion of this meeting. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, folks, I think that what we want to do now is we'll just keep rolling along and go to city council updates and council comments. And I'm just going to go across the screen here, and I'll start with Councilor Gabriel, if you had anything for us, updates or comments.
Be real quick on this one. Parks, Tree, and Rec Board will meet tomorrow night to hear from a number of groups around the city, like the Laramie Soccer Club, Laramie Enduro, Laramie Bike Net. City of Laramie has projects, and this is the Albany County Rec money. And the Parks, Rec, and Tree Board first will review all of these and then pass along the recommendations to the Albany County Rec Board. City of Laramie has a number of projects, including family-friendly workout area, outdoor pool boiler replacement at the rec department, also the rec Center cost recovery, and they're asking for $175,000 there. Also, Washington Park Playground replacement for 25, Kiowa Park Playground replacement for 15. The city has about $305,000 in request to the rec board, and this is money that's collected from property taxes. And over the past 11 years, it's generated about $384,000 in payment. So the city will make their presentation tomorrow night before the Parks, Tree, and Rec Board. Then that will go on to the Albany County Recreation Board, who will make the final recommendation to the Albany County Board of Trustees in July. So there's a couple of processes to go through, but the city has some good projects that hopefully will be approved, and we will have some money to run the rec department, and also improvements for Washington and Kiowa Park. Thank you, Mayor. That's it.
Thank you very much, Councilor Gabriel. Great update. That's a biggie. That's a big one, and it's gonna be of interest as we move forward to see what we're going to be able to do. I really appreciate it. Councilor Harrington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one quick update. The December meeting, so it's a little bit of a delayed update for you all, but given sort of the nature of the schedule through the holidays, this is my first opportunity to update you all. The Pilot Hill Board has begun sort of very preliminary discussions about where trailhead access may be in the city of Laramie. So I will keep you all updated as those plans sort of, and staff of course as well, as those plans start to solidify a little bit. As a really near-term solution, given that sort of the financial picture of all organizations now in the time of COVID and sort of more broadly, in a nearer term solution, Boulder Drive is one potential option that could potentially be achieved with just like restriping the street for diagonal parking or something like that to increase the parking density at the end of that street past Snowy Range Academy, where any sort of runoff would still just enter the stormwater system, if I understand correctly, from Boulder down to Grand Avenue. So I will keep you all updated as those things begin to take shape. But you will also note that some of those conversations are included in the goals packet that was due at 12:30 today. So be prepared for that conversation to continue on. That is my only update, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor Harrington. That's another big one. I appreciate that, and we'll look forward to some more information on it as it rolls out. Councilor Cumby.
Councilor O'Doherty and I attended the Disabilities Commission, and March is Disability Awareness Month, and we are looking at a group of activities to help raise community awareness. Aaron has brought forward, and Aaron, I can let you talk a little more about that, but has brought forth an idea regarding Adopt a Curb that would allow organizations, neighborhoods, churches possibly, to take the initiative to make sure that snow is cleared from the curb ramps so that there is accessibility for individuals with mobility issues. One of the members is putting together a list of disability resources that could be useful to families and individuals living with disabilities in our community. And we talked about taking that and working with the library to have that publicly posted and possibly on different websites so that people can find that and access those resources. We're in the process of contacting the school libraries and working with the librarians to possibly do a display of reading material during the month of March, where students could check out books and other information related to disabilities. And they're also checking on a person in the community that has done puppet shows and around that topic. And what we thought about is, rather than just doing a puppet show, that we would film that so that the film of that puppet show could be used in a number of different venues. I was very pleased that Aaron went with me and is helping me to kind of get my feet wet. So thank you, Aaron. Do you have anything to add about that?
Why don't you go ahead, Aaron, so it's good, so we stay
Okay.
Yeah.
So the curb ramp, the reason I asked for the Disability Council's approval, and they did approve of having some kind of adopt a ramp in Laramie, is because by the time Disability Awareness Month comes around in March, we're getting near the end of our snow removal issues. So we would like to try to raise awareness before that, and maybe model it after cities that have adopt a hydrant to ask citizens to keep the snow clear of fire hydrants to make things safer. So Councilor Cumby and I are going to research it because we didn't want to be putting more responsibility on staff. We're going to research this and come up with some ideas that are low input for staff, but just to raise awareness. And then can I give my update about Environmental Advisory Committee?
Why don't you go ahead and do that?
Okay, so a subcommittee of the Environmental Advisory Committee has sent us a letter, and you probably all have it, but I forwarded it again just a little while ago, so you know what I was talking about. The bill that was introduced in November to the Joint Corporations, Elections, and Political Subdivisions Committee, and it was changed quite a bit. It has become Senate File 0016, and the committee would like the city to consider crafting a letter, or if they would craft a letter and we would consider signing a letter to the legislature asking them, please don't retire hands with this net metering policy. And some of the main points of the letter, which I thought were really interesting, is that rooftop solar is an important component of our plan to achieve carbon neutrality. And also in these times of economic transition, we need to have a way to bring more jobs, and rooftop solar installations provide that. And then I thought a really good point was a way to return brownfield land into productive sites. They call it bright fields, changing brownfields into bright fields, because perhaps we could use brownfields for solar power, and that would be a way for our city to get some revenue and also change things around. And the assumption about rooftop solar not paying their fair share is controversial. So those are the items in the letter. Maybe we could, there isn't much time, because I know the legislature is going to meet for 8 days to consider the bills that are already drafted. So we don't have much time, I think, to coordinate with other cities. We would barely have time to decide if the council wants to approve such a letter as a council. So I guess we'd have to talk about that at a meeting. But in the meantime, if councilors want to talk to the legislature on their own, not representing the city, but representing somebody that knows something about the city and our goals, I think that would be a good idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Doherty. And
excuse me, Mr. Mayor, I forgot. Ellen Carano, the chair of the committee, is here. So if we had any questions for her or clarifications, we might want to give her the opportunity to clarify in case I messed anything up. Thank you.
I don't disagree with that, and I was about to make a comment that we should feel free as members of this council, and also that our Environmental Advisory Committee should feel free to contact the members of this council individually or as a group to express their views on some of these things as they see fit. I am going to give an opportunity for Ellen to talk, but I want to go ahead and get back around to council members for comments, because I don't believe we don't have too many more people on the list, and then we'll go ahead and do that if that works for everybody. Thank you, I appreciate that. So getting back into the kind of round robin order, Councilor Stalder, you're up.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have any updates as I haven't started any of my new boards yet, but I just wanted to say to Aaron, Councilor Doherty, and Councilor Cumby, thank you for your work on the disabilities. It was reminding me of 2 years ago when we did the wheelchair thing over the curbs in downtown, and just how eye-opening that was to me. And so thank you for what you're doing to promote awareness. I don't think we could I'll be cruising around in wheelchairs together, but thanks.
Good comments, and I couldn't agree more. Thank you, Councilor Stalder. Councilor Schuster, do you have something for us?
I have nothing at this time.
Thank you very much, Councilor Schuster. Councilor Somerville.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of quick updates, and Aaron, if you don't mind if I tack on to that net metering bill, I believe that was referred today by the legislature to the Corporations Committee. They're actually going to be meeting next week to consider that bill. So that'll either happen on Tuesday or Thursday next week, depending on the preference of the corporation's chair. So schedule is tighter, even tighter, I guess I would say. So Laramie Main Street Alliance has a public comment period open tomorrow regarding the design guidelines, and then they have a meeting tomorrow night to consider amendments to those design guidelines. I believe that's been a conversation and a project ongoing with the city. And then I attended Planning Commission for Councilor Harrington, so he might be able to catch a nap, maybe, if Ruby decided to let him do that. And they approved some non-conforming parking lot designs. There's an apartment complex on Rainbow that's actually was originally built as Section 8 housing, so it's low-income housing. They're going to do a full remodel of that apartment, and so Planning Commission approved some modifications that would allow them to keep their parking spaces and put some landscaping in some other areas. And that's all the updates that I have.
Thank you, Councilmember Somerville. I appreciate that. If there aren't any concerns about it, I would like to go ahead and give our EAC chair an opportunity to provide some further comments and information on the timely topic. So why don't you go ahead, Ellen, and thanks for being here.
Thank you, Mayor Weaver, City Council. So as Councilor Somerville just brought up, time really is of the essence. So this bill, which repeals net metering, and so we really need to fight it. Our plans for carbon net neutrality in Laramie depend on having rooftop solar systems on various municipal buildings. And then the potential for jobs, and not just the jobs through the solar installations, but if we're trying to recruit new corporations, people like Amazon and Google and the Bitcoin industry, having renewable energy is very appealing to those industries. And so EAC is asking City Council to do whatever you can in the time available to reach out to legislators and oppose this bill. So if it's at all possible for there to be a formal statement by the city, we would ask that to be considered.
All right, thank you for that. The process, I think, for that would be something along the lines of what we're already seeing, which is the letter that's been provided through our advisory committee, and then possible consideration of a resolution. City Manager Jordan, I'd ask that you weigh in on that too, if you have any thoughts about the correct procedure for that.
Mayor, I'm sorry, the procedure for submitting a letter, is that what you're asking?
No, for the council in terms of making a statement stemming from an action by our advisory committee on this net metering topic. They provided us with a letter, I think, outlining concerns and issues. It fits with within the umbrella of one of our policy goals, and then what the next move would be in terms of the council. I think we would probably consider a resolution.
Yes, correct. Thank you. I'm sorry. I didn't quite follow you before. Yes, in the past, what the council have done is adopted resolutions that would establish a policy statement or position for the city that we've subsequently submitted to whatever the relevant body is. So that would be what I would suggest. And you do have a meeting. We're going to review an agenda here in just a few minutes. It could be possible based on the work that EAC has already done as far as articulating a position, that I could use that as a basis for putting together a quick resolution for your agenda next week if you'd like to consider one.
Are there any objections from the council about that making an appearance on the agenda? Councilor Somerville.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't have an objection. I just want to bring up that the Corporations Committee, the legislative committees have been told to meet on the normally scheduled days that are assigned during a session, even though they're meeting by Zoom. Corporations Committee meets Tuesday morning, so that would be a 7 a.m. or an 8 a.m. meeting on Tuesday potentially, unless they chose the Thursday date, which is a Thursday morning. So it might be prudent for us to consider, we could still do that, but just realize that if they met on Tuesday morning, our letter would not get to the committee or have any impact, but we would still have a letter for down the line if that was what the council desired. The legislative process is going to be broken up several times over the next 3 months. It's not going to look like we have in the past. So I just want to bring that to everybody's attention.
Thank you for that information. And unfortunately, the council would need to follow that process of the resolution, following our own procedures and guidelines. That said, I don't know that there's anything that would prevent individual council members who chose to contact that committee and make their opinion clear on that issue prior to that potential Tuesday meeting in conjunction with that letter that's been sent to us by our Environmental Advisory Committee. I don't see any means or way for us to take an official action through a resolution anytime before then, given that calendar timing. So I guess that would be what I would advise at this point, without hearing from anybody else yet. That since that, yeah, Councilor Doherty, I see you're seeking recognition. Go ahead.
Those of you who are more familiar with the legislature, so first it has to go. Well, it's been to the committee, but it goes to the committee again, and then to the committee as a whole, right? So there's still time for us to have a letter that we could give to someone, and in the meantime, those of us that feel strongly could speak personally. Right? Does that sound right? Thank you.
Yeah, that's what I think would be the correct thing. If you have a position on this, then writing individually to the members of that committee will probably be the way to go. I think it still would make sense for us to have the discussion about a resolution at our Tuesday meeting, and then we'll go from there. City Manager, are you looking for recognition? Go ahead.
No, I was not.
Okay, you're doing that thing that I do where I put my hand up here and it confuses me.
Right, sorry, I won't do that.
No, that's all right. I appreciate that, and I appreciate those words from our EAC chair and our further information about that. And I think council members will do what they think is the right thing to do. And on Tuesday, we'll see about adding a discussion for a resolution regarding that information you provided us. Appreciate it. I think now we've gone through updates, and I would ask us to go ahead and weigh in on any comments, and I'll just do that by hands up if there are. Councilor Harrington, you're first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. most of you may know, but I have an older sister that has autism, who recently moved to Laramie. Last week, she was in a small car accident. Everyone was fine, but given her sort of special needs, it was sort of a potentially more dynamic situation. And I just wanted to acknowledge Officer Craney, I think is his name. It might be Craney. I don't know how to pronounce it properly, and I apologize for that. But he handled the situation with abundant patience. She has a hard time communicating, especially when she's riled up, and she was in that moment. So I just wanted to acknowledge him and publicly say thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor Harrington. Thank you very much for that comment, and I'm glad everybody was okay. Yeah. Any other comments that people want to provide right now before we move on to the next bit? All right, I'm not seeing anybody, so thank you very much. So that brings us to agenda review. I'll take just a minute, let everybody pull that up and have some time to move through that. I think we have one thing that's come up in our discussion in the last few minutes is that we might want to try and find a time and a place for this resolution. I would say this to the council: this may be a somewhat lengthy meeting because we have a couple of topics that have generated interest, and we're also looking at an executive session. I'm not saying one way or the other that we shouldn't add anything to it. I'm saying that it's already probably going to be a sufficiently lengthy meeting, just as a heads up. I could be wrong about that. You know, my predictive ability about what's going to take a lot of time in a meeting and how long they're going to go, I don't have the best track record, so who knows. But you take a look at that and see, and also think about where you might want to place that item in there. You know what? Before we do that, it strikes me that I forgot to recognize the Vice Mayor for updates and comments. Vice Mayor Pierce.
Thank you, Mayor Weaver. I don't have any comments, and in terms of updates, I think everybody saw my email related to age-friendly, the age-friendly meeting on Thursday of this week. So if you have comments or suggestions or want to attend, the information is there, and I'd appreciate all the company and all the comment suggestions that are out there. So thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor, and I apologize for that. My intention was to have you weigh in, and then I would after everybody else had. And I don't have anything further in terms of an update right now. You know, we're all just kind of getting started, like Councilor Stalder said. I mean, some of these meetings haven't taken place yet, so give it a couple of weeks, and some of us will probably have some lengthier updates for you about some of these things. All right, so let's go ahead and just one more minute and for people to take a peek at that agenda, unless you guys are ready now. And if you are and you have something, then I'd open it up.
I think in terms of the resolution, if I could just get started, the resolution related to net metering. I don't anticipate that being a long discussion. I could be wrong, but I think we could get that, you know, put it right up front, make it number 11, and move everything. Because I'd hate to put it at the end and then not get to it, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Or maybe before items in between 13 and 14.
Mr. Mayor, that's where I was thinking as well.
I'm okay with that. I think that makes sense also. Any other feedback on that? We could put that in there to sit between those two items. Not seeing any objections or anybody looking to weigh in on that. City Manager Jordan, do you think that would be okay?
Yes, Mayor, I think that'll work fine.
All right, why don't we do that? And that's a change that we'll make prior to the meeting on Tuesday, and get that in there. And for the EAC chair, if you'd like to, if there are members that want to attend, you know, to just reinforce your messaging, you know, of course, feel free. as I know you would. And we'll have that discussion and consider that resolution. All right. Anything else besides adding that item? You know, you'll take a look there and you'll see some items that have been touched on at least in brief before, and then you'll see a couple of things coming up. And just open for questions and comments. Councilor Stalder, I see you.
Thank you, Mayor. I noticed that there's scheduled meetings for February 2nd for the citywide parking standards and wireless communication towers, but they're also on the agenda. So I was just wondering why we're having a public hearing after we have the first, I don't know if I said that right, or if we brought that up before, but we have public hearings scheduled for the 2nd for both of those, and then the first reading on the 19th.
I think typically when we have a first reading of an item like that, we'll have a first reading just to get it on the agenda, introduced officially. Hopefully have, you know, people from the public notified so that they can be present for comments at the public hearing on the second reading.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, if I could add, Mayor, quickly, we are required by statute with ordinance, particular ordinances, to conduct that hearing. But that, I just want to reassure you that that is typically not the only conversation that we've had with the public. It's just the statutorily required one.
Thank you, City Manager. And if experience serves at all, sometimes we won't attract the level of public interest until it's appeared as an agenda item, and then hopefully what that does is get folks that have something to say about it in attendance for second reading, maybe even first reading, and we can direct them towards that larger unlimited opportunity that they'll have to weigh in on at the second hearing. Good question, though. Anything else? Something that garnered a conversation earlier for the first agenda setting meeting was there's two items that you might note on there. One is the cellular communications regulations and changes to code. I would add, just for an FYI for council members, what's generating that is change at the federal level in the way that is being regulated, and it has a great deal to do, as I understand it, with 5G expansion in communities and the communication industry looking to increase the reach of 5G across the country, and that's going to require some updates to the way we, at an individual community level, regulate tower location and size and things to that effect. I think that may garner some discussion. You'll also see another amendment to our North Campus Public Works Facility project. It seems to me that what happens frequently when we have these large-scale projects is, as the contracts are executed and our contractors continue the work with those, things that weren't anticipated because there really wasn't a way for them to be anticipated until the work started come up, and there's work to do. And I know we'll have an opportunity for expanded questions and more information about that at the meeting. But I had noticed that we had seen a few amendments to that already, maybe more than we'd be used to. I think it's worth remembering, as Mr. Webb reminded me today, just the size and scope of that project is larger than perhaps what we might think of as the usual City of Laramie project. It's a real big one. There's a lot going on with that one. It's a complicated project, and so things come up with it. Just 2 cents to throw in on that, and an FYI for council members. I'm not seeing anybody asking for recognition on any other agenda items, but I'll ask again. I think folks probably are hoping to wrap up the meeting, which is fine. Any other questions on the agenda? All right. And we've had an opportunity for comments, but we'll open up an opportunity for public comments before we end the work session. I don't think we have anybody in line here.
I have none, Mayor.
Thank you very much, City Clerk. Well, with that, I think we'll go ahead and close this work session. I want to give thank you for everyone for being here. I appreciate your time and effort and all your thoughtful comments tonight. And that was a really informative work session from our engineering people. Really appreciate it. So without anything else, I will end the work session and say good evening to you all, and we'll see you next time.
Bye all.
Good night, everyone.